Welcome to The Long Haul, the podcast dedicated to empowering small carriers and owner-operators to drive their business forward. I'm your host, Adam Wingfield, bringing you insights from industry leaders, real-world success stories, and strategies to help you navigate the road to profitability. Whether you're just getting started or looking to take your fleet to the next level, this is the show where trucking meets opportunity. So buckle up, it's time to go the distance. Welcome back to another exciting episode of The Long Haul today. Obviously, you know, when we get on these podcast episodes, our goal is to provide you with practical information and resources so that way you can take your business and go the long haul with it. Today, I'm excited to really dive in on a topic which I think is very, very important and critical for the small operator, the owner operator out there, in order for you to be successful when building your business. So today, we're going to really dive in on a topic that can make or break your business, especially when you start out building strong broker relationships. Whether you're an owner operator or a small fleet, your ability to develop those solid partnerships with brokers can really make the difference between failure or success. And that really kind of boils down to it. So the ones that do a really good job find consistent loads and are able to scale their business, and the ones that don't typically struggle. To help us break that down, we've got a special guest today. He's the founder of the Broker Carrier Summit. He spent years working with brokers and carriers, and he's made it his mission to bridge the gap between the two sides. Through the BCS, he's created a platform that brings brokers and carriers together to improve communication, foster trust, and create more profitable partnerships. In an industry often fueled by tension and mistrust, he's here to share what carriers need to do to build better relationships with brokers, why it matters, and how it can lead to higher profits and long-term success. Ladies and gentlemen, this man is super passionate about it. I mean, this is not just a tagline in terms of what he's trying to do. He's actually living it, breathing it every day. I get to watch his work behind the scenes and in front of the scenes every day, and this is not no joke. I'm super excited to have my friend Dan Lindsey on the show today. Dan, welcome to The Long Haul.
Thanks for having me, Adam. Great to talk to you again.
It's great to talk to you as well, man. You guys there's a lot of things going on in the marketplace today, and I'm really wanting to dive into that. But for the folks that don't know you, I want to take a couple of steps back. I want to put the car in reverse first and kind of talk about it. Where did your journey in trucking really start? How did that become one of the things that you fell into?
Yeah, it was not intentional, as is common story in the industry. My dad was a driver for UPS for 30 years. I told him I never wanted to go into trucking. But my first job out of high school was the preload docks at UPS. And I worked there for 6 years, went into the Marine Corps, finished college, did a couple things, and then came back in 2013 to work at a freight brokerage, which I didn't really know what freight brokers did. I didn't know that was a thing until I went to go work for TQL. I stayed there for 6 years, learned a lot about how the industry works, a lot of the good, a lot of the bad, a lot of the ugly, as I always say. And one of the first things that became apparent was that brokers and carriers hated each other. And I didn't really know why. I didn't have a lot of context. And so I decided early on in my brokerage career to not commoditize myself with my customers and not commoditize my carriers when it came to working with me. And so I moved probably 80 to 90% of my loads with fewer than 5 carriers in the 6 years I was there. I rarely went out to load boards. I have nothing against load boards, but that's not the way I wanted to do business. That's not the way I wanted to deal with my customers and my carriers. And did really well. At the brokerage. My carriers did really well. And so ultimately I did get burnt out after 6.5 years of slinging freight, 22 and a half hours a day, 7 days a week. So took a year off, went into the consulting world, worked for a parcel spend management consultant for a year, and then started my own brokerage up because I'm a glutton for punishment in March of 2020. And then got the idea in 22 to start up something. We didn't really know what it was going to be. I just was tired of hearing people complain about the other side of the industry. And so we decided to get brokers and carriers together in the same room and talk about our differences. And that's where the Broker Carrier Summit came from.
Why do you think that relationship, man, just take it back a little bit. Why do you think the relationship between brokers and carriers are so strained? And, seeing it on the broker side, obviously you have a unique perspective. And then when you become the intermediary between the two, you also get a different side of the table. Why do you think that relationship is so strained over the years?
Yeah, I'm gonna clean this up. Uh, everybody needs to own their stuff.
Yeah,
Okay. Brokers have not done themselves any favors. If we're being brutally honest with ourselves, they've not done themselves any favors by and large when it comes to endearing themselves to carriers. Likewise, carriers have not gone out of their way or been incentivized to go out of their way to endear themselves to brokers either. And so instead of humbling oneself and coming to the table as a neutral party or as a partner, um, people have come to the conversation with animosity and bitterness and distrust towards each other. And it's not altogether unfounded as to why they do that, but it's just not an optimal way to do business.
you think it's just it's just a painting a generic picture that all brokers are bad on a carrier side, and then from a broker side that most carriers are bad. Do you think it's just due to that, or is it you think there's an anomaly, or
Yeah, I think it's that. It's also you don't have any idea how valuable I am because I am the most valuable person in my life. So when you get this a lot when carriers talk about brokers, specifically when drivers talk about brokers, one of the common complaints, and it's well founded, is that brokers have zero idea what it's like to operate a truck. That is 100%
that's
true.
true?
For the
That's
vast
true.
majority of brokers, they've never sat in a seat. That does not mean that just because they have not sat in the driver's seat, that they don't understand how to do business or the principles of doing good business. It also doesn't mean that the driver is the most valuable asset in the transaction. It does not mean that the broker is the most valuable asset in the transaction, but you get a lot of owner operators who get on their high horse about brokers and say, you wouldn't be anywhere without me. Well, nobody knows that more than the brokers do. You don't have to say that. So there's just a lot of bitterness and infighting that goes back and forth. It's not terribly helpful.
Well, you think about that too. Sometimes what you don't know is what really fuels bitterness, because if you knew exactly what was going on, you probably would give it a little bit more grace. And I think
Yeah.
that, to your point, some of that comes down to me being the most important person on the end of the phone call saying, hey, you need me and I don't need you type situation. But ultimately, honestly, without brokers, there wouldn't be the opportunity to move freight in a lot of instances, because you got shippers that don't want to have to play the cat and mouse game of tracking down, thousands of different carriers and thousands of different trucks and really trying to manage the asset. So I want you to take it a little bit back, because you got the experience from the broker side. And for the folks that are listening to this particular podcast, they're on the carrier side for the most part. I want you to take me through a day of being a broker. Like, what does that day look like? How does because a lot of times I'm gonna tell you, and we can be brutally honest with each other. A lot of times, where what you hear is that brokers are pin pusher and keyboard warriors. They don't actually do anything, but they reap the rewards and benefit. We know that that's not true, but without understanding how the day looks, that's really, really difficult for us to get past that propaganda and then get to the reality of it.
Yeah.
So, what does a day look like, from a broker standpoint? What does a full day look like without taking out the exception of tracking and tracing all day long? What does a day look like?
Right. Yeah. So typically I would wake up at 4 a.m. And just check on my loads.
Yeah.
Before I got the kids up for school, before my wife and I got a chance to talk, I was up looking at the load boards or the internal load board, making sure that my drivers were tracking where they were supposed to be. Um, And typically, I get emails from my customers overnight, and I address those. Uh, all the problems that seem to be existential in trucking seem to happen when you're asleep. And so, typically at 4 a.m. when I wake up, I've already gotten a phone call or two from a customer or from a driver who's on site or not on site, or having an issue. So, after I actually get to the office, it's check calls all the way up until 9:30, 10 o'clock. Also, that's when all the loads in for my accounts got tendered to me. So I relied on my team to do all of the check calls. And this was at the beginning of MacroPoint back in the day. So it's a little different now. But the customer emails were nonstop. And the communication with the drivers and the dispatchers was also nonstop. And we moved about 50 to 60 loads a week. And so at any given point in time, we had, 15, 20 loads over the road. Well, we're trying to manage those loads, myself and two other people, encountering all of the issues and challenges that comes with, over the road freight. At the same time, I have to make sure that my team and my company can pay the bills, and so I'm going out and looking for new business while my team is managing the loads over the road. Um, what a lot of people don't understand is that as the broker, as the customer facing side of the business, at a brokerage, you're doing both jobs. You're managing the dispatchers on your team. You're managing the carrier sales team. You're negotiating and establishing what the rate should be, based on your experience, based on the data you receive, and you're also externally trying to sell your services to more customers. And so you have to be extremely time sensitive and extremely intentional about how you manage your time. My day and in the office would start at 7 a.m. and it wouldn't end until about 7:30 p.m. And most of the time after hours was me calling shippers, trying to follow up with them as well. And then I can't count the number of times I took calls from drivers, updates from dispatchers during family dinners, over the weekends. My wife made the comment that they never really had me on vacation. I would always go to places. We would always go to places on family vacation where my company had an office, and I would split my time between family vacation and going to the office. Um, and it's a similar situation where if you're leading a small brokerage, in fact, I thought being a broker was stressful and was busy. Um, that was nothing compared to 2020 to 2023, when I was scaling up a small brokerage. We brought on 17 people in 3 years, did a really good job in growing. But as the owner, you're not only doing all the things that a broker does or all the things that a carrier sales rep does, you're also doing managing all of the claims. You're also having conversations with tech partners to try and maximize the efficiency when it comes to your operations and your TMS and your tech stack. You're also dealing with insurance companies. Every issue that your brokers have gets rolled up to you. You have visibility into all the issues, and so I understand the frustration that brokers don't know what it's like out on the open road. We absolutely don't, and I think a lot of brokers are becoming more and more humble to admit that. But just because most of what brokers do is in the office does not mean that it's less valuable or less stressful. To be honest, drivers are stuck in a truck 10, 14 hours a day. We're stuck in a cubicle 10 to 14 hours a day, fueled by coffee and Zen. It's, yeah.
Yeah, Dan, and even you hit on a lot of things, but there was one component that really just kind of flew under the radar a little bit that I think is a major part of the day. You talked about it, you spoke on it. He's like, we're running 40, 50 loads a week, but talk to them where those loads come from and the work that has to go into you for actually finding a customer that actually going to tend to those loads to you, because that's a totally different dynamic. And the reason why I say that is because you hear and I'm going to play both sides of the fence. You hear all the time where carriers don't need brokers, brokers need carriers, but they truly need both. So go into it onto, hey, what is how do I find carrier? What comes first? The carrier or the shipper? Is it chicken or the egg? Tell us how you went about your process on finding freight.
Yeah, finding freight was much harder than finding carriers. And I don't say that to disparage carriers or drivers at all. It's just winning freight is damn hard. Whether you're a broker or a carrier. The metrics that I used, because I also led a sales team when I was at a big box brokerage. The metrics that I rolled out to my team was every 100 phone calls you make, you will probably get 8 quality leads. Out of those 8 quality leads, you will probably get 2 meetings. And out of those 2 meetings, you will probably get maybe 1 customer. So
1%.
in order to get a full pipeline of active customers under your book, you have to make literally thousands of phone calls. And I know phone calls, people say making phone calls is not work. It's not hard. Uh, make them, make those
Right.
cold calls
Right.
and make them day after day, make them week after week. Have everybody in the world tell you no. Have everybody in the world tell you to F off. Tell them, hey, we're looking for assets only. We're not looking for brokers. Learn how to handle 15 dozen different types of objections, while also not losing motivation and not losing your mind. It's the sales process in freight is grueling, and it's one of the most underestimated, I think, challenges in freight is actually winning the freight. And then when you get the freight, or when you get the opportunity to bid on the freight, most, and this is especially true now, most of the opportunities, quote unquote, you get are going to be in the form of 500,000, 5,000 lane RFPs that you then have to spend a week and a half.
Going through.
If you don't have a pricing analyst on your team, you have to spend a week and a half or 2 weeks combing through each and every lane, doing the research on each and every lane, especially if you work for a small brokerage, because you can't pay for tools like the I forget what it's called over at DAT. But they have the ability for you to upload all the lanes, and it spits out all the rates for you. You have to do all those by hand, because you're not going to spend $1,000 a month to get that tool, because you can't make book if you spend $1,000 a month to get that tool. So it's a lot of just absolutely just mind bending work, and the mental exhaustion that freight brokers go through is not something to be taken lightly.
You know, the crazy thing about that is that there's a difference between physical fatigue and mental fatigue. And you know, some of the times when you look at it, man, being mentally fatigued sometimes run circles around that physical fatigue. And you know, when you look back at it, you were just talking about what the day in a life looks like. Like that's sunrise to sunset plus of nonstop to the wall. I'm either calling, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I got my phone ringing up. There's so many things that are happening within that for you to be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to charge X amount of percent because I went through 100 calls. I went through
Mm-hmm.
92 waste of my times. I went through 98. Hey, I got in the door and still wasted my time before I got to the one that said, hey, you know what, Dan, I trust you. Let's do some business together. You got to think about that, man. Would you,
Well,
would
and
you,
even if you win that freight, that may not be money making profitable freight for you.
yeah, it might be. And it might also be
There's
on the
that too.
low volume lanes too. You might win freight on a low volume lane to where, okay, I did all that work and I only got what, 20 loads a week on this.
Mm-hmm. And then even if you do get that, and you run the load, and even if it is profitable, then you run into the issue of, what if the shipper doesn't pay? Then you still don't get paid.
And you still got to pay the carrier at that point. So, you know, so there's
Right.
so
And
many.
the carrier still has to get paid.
Carriers still got to get paid. There's so many layers of that. And that's what really kind of, I think that one of the biggest things is just the day in the life of a broker is important. I think the thing about it, you know, because obviously I come from the truck side. And I think that, you know, I could put you in a truck all day long. You can figure it out. You know, ultimately you'll figure it out. But running a trucking company is different. And the crazy thing is that, you know, you know, I'm a straight shooter. The crazy thing is that there are trucking company owners that can't run their businesses either. And when it comes down to that, that's a dangerous mix when you don't have a good understanding on how to run the dynamics of your own business. And then you say, hey, you know, the smoking gun is, you know, Dan is the problem and not me. So accountability really comes down to it. So I really wanted to really just talk through that. So when you think about that, what do you think carriers should understand from about a broker's challenge and how they manage freight? What do you think should be the understanding principle, most importantly, to help bridge the gap between brokers and carriers?
Neither side is more valuable than the other.
Yeah, but what if
I
I
think.
mean, in that you're gonna face that a lot, right? You're gonna face that
Mhm.
challenge. You're gonna face pushback on that a lot. I want you to overcome that objection and push back on that.
Yeah, because just as brokers need carriers as an existential need for their business, if you are a small to mid-sized carrier without a sales team and without a sales background, you need brokers because they are your customers. This is the only industry that I've ever worked in where the vendor is angry that they have to go out and get customers. And when I say that, I mean, carriers do not like working with brokers, but brokers pay for your business to operate. Brokers help make you profitable. Brokers pay the bills. It's just like me as a broker going out and being frustrated and angry that I have to go find shippers because I shouldn't have to go find shippers. Well, how are you gonna run a business? So I think one of the most overlooked qualities in not just leadership but business and entrepreneurship in general is humility. You have to be humble enough to realize what you need and to rely on other people to provide the things that you can't provide for yourself. And as a carrier, if you do not have the drive or the ability or the background or the desire to go out and sell your ass off, then you have zero right to be upset that you're working with brokers. And again, I don't say that to be inflammatory or to be a jerk. It's just true. You can either go out and find the direct freight yourself, or you can rely on those who are willing to do it for you.
So, what do brokers consider when choosing the carriers that you're going to actually work with? Because remember, one of the things with you didn't like putting stuff on the load board because, that's not where your best service went. You had a group of carriers that you trusted, and that was it. What are those qualities that you look for when it comes down to that?
Consistent on deliverables. And so
What are
if
those?
I call a carrier and I know what to expect, and I know that if I call, ABC Trucking, right? If I call ABC Trucking and he's like, oh yeah, I got a driver. His name is Bob. He's 10 miles out, and he'll be there in 30 minutes. Okay. If I've worked with that carrier before and they've delivered time and time again, I'm not going to worry about that load getting picked up. As opposed to if I have to go out on a load board and on 50 different loads a week and work with 48 different carriers, every single load is a raging ball of anxiety, because you don't know the driver, you don't know the dispatcher, you don't know the processes that carrier has in place, if they have any at all. And you don't know if the data that we're pulling from FMCSA is accurate or updated. You don't know if their drivers are safe when operating over the road. You are not 100% sure if the insurance certificate is up to date. You know what the data tells you, but there's always that latent anxiety in the back. But if you work with a carrier who you've worked with before and you know their processes and you've had good partnership focused conversations with them, it takes a lot of that anxiety out. And what the carrier will find is that if you can reduce your customers' anxiety, and I'm going to call them customers, if you can reduce your customers' anxiety, they will give you more freight without even having to think about it. Because who else are they going to give it to? They're going to give it to the partner who helps them sleep better at night. Bottom line. I used to tell my customers all the time, I don't sell freight. I sell peace of mind.
So when it comes down to that, do brokers actually reward that loyalty, or is it, hey, I've got a carrier that can get this rate and run this rate cheaper?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends on the broker, to be honest. I
Yeah.
know. So during my time when I was actively brokering freight, I worked with a handful of carriers. Those carriers were consistently paid 15 to 20% more than what we would find on the load boards. Because I told my customers, look, you can go out and get load board freight. You'll have busted up product. You'll have claims out the wazoo. You'll have all kinds of problems. You know what you get with me, and you know what you get with my carriers. So this is what that level of service is going to cost. And I showed my customers, I showed my carriers my margins. I didn't care, because it's not about taking as much as you can get. It was never about that for me. It was about how can we create an environment where everybody wins. And ironically, that mindset is one of the biggest things that's fueling the BCS, the Broker Carrier Summit. Is how can we create an environment where everybody wins? Because that is 100% possible.
So how can a small carrier owner operator stand out when competing against, the ones that are already in your Rolodex? You've already got preferred carriers in the network. I'm a small carrier. I've been using a load board, but I want to get on Dan's good side as a broker. What can small carriers do to do that?
Yeah, reach out proactively to the brokerage or to the individual broker about lanes they don't have, and ask them if they can find them for them. Or call the broker and say, hey, I really want to, I'm always stuck in, I don't know, Chattanooga, right? And I can't get out of Chattanooga or Memphis or wherever. Can you find me loads out? If that broker individual broker cannot find you loads out and he works for a larger company, he will refer you to somebody else at his company that will give you the ability to find loads out of where you're at. Um, you have to treat your brokers as if they are a customer. Customers are not, by and large, going to reach out to you. You have to pursue them, and you have to pursue them in a way that reflects the kind of relationship you want to have. It's just like dating, right? If you're at a bar having a conversation with somebody and you want the conversation to go a certain way, you're going to speak a certain way. Okay. If you were looking for a one night stand, you'll find a one night stand. If you're looking for a wife, your conversation will be entirely different, but you will find that spouse. It's the same thing. You get out of the relationship exactly what you put in. And if you want the relationship, take the initiative and pursue that customer.
Have you seen examples where a carrier completely turned around a struggling business by changing how they work with brokers or interact with brokers?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, we've seen it at the broker carrier summit. It was a situation where the carrier was struggling. Their safety scores weren't up to par. They've been operating for a while and they didn't have the greatest reputation. They didn't have any glaring issues, but it wasn't an ideal fit. And when they came to the BCS, I think it was the one either in Tampa or Kansas City, I can't remember which one. They met a broker. They met two brokers actually, and they were able to establish a good personal relationship with them. And they said, "Look, this is in our company profile. We're working to change it. Here's our safety. What's the safety
Safety scores, CSA scores.
score? CSA score, yeah, to get us back into compliance. And we really like the opportunity to work with you as a way to rebuild our standing in the industry." That happened, and to this day, I believe that carrier works almost exclusively with those brokers, and they've helped turn their own business around, and they've been able to provide us an extremely valuable service to that broker where they're able to cover lanes now consistently that they weren't able to cover before.
Wow, wow. Now with the raise and you've got digital freight platforms with that coming and you got technology starting to really kind of take off, do you think traditional broker relationships are becoming less important or will personal connections still matter? Is it going to be a combination of both? What do we look like in the next 5 years, which we know how fast and rapidly technology can accelerate that process?
Yeah, I think one of the issues that we've seen really take an ugly turn in the last 5 years is people delegating personal relationships to technology. Technology has an extremely valuable place when it comes to process development, when it comes to
Yeah.
efficiencies, when it comes to all that. If you are going again, you will get out of a relationship what you put into it. And if you rely on bot, or if you rely on AI, or if you
Yeah.
rely on whatever it might be to do the relational work for you, you will not reap what you think you are going to reap. And so I actually think that personal relationships are going to be more important in the age of AI. Digital brokerages, I think, have their place, but at the end of the day, people don't want to have a conversation with a bot. People don't want to have a conversation with an AI written script. They want to have conversations with people who are able to relate to them and empathize with their situation, especially when there are issues over the road. If you're a driver on the road at 3 a.m. and you have a blown tire, you're going to be an hour and a
Yeah.
half late to your delivery. The last person you want to freaking
Is a
talk to
bot.
is some bot.
Yeah.
That phone's getting broken.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
good is going to happen in that conversation. So I think personal relationships are going to actually be more valuable and come at a higher premium than technology.
So, what do you think about the role of broker transparency? And obviously, that's a very, very, very hot topic. It's a hot subject. You're going to have very, very, very stark differences of opinions depending on who you ask. From that perspective, how do you think that plays out in the future negotiations between brokers and carriers, if it plays out at all?
Yeah. So like I said before, I had no problem sharing my margins with my carriers, and I had no problem sharing my margins with my customers.
Why wouldn't a
Um,
broker want to do that though?
because again, the broker carrier relationship has been based on distrust for so long. Um, and if you're spending all of your time on the load boards, not knowing your carriers, not getting to know them on a personal level, I'm not giving my information to you.
Yeah.
You can pound sand.
Yeah.
I got into this discussion with a couple of drivers a few months ago when the FMCSA came out with their new comment period for the rulemaking. I came out against coerced transparency by the government. I am 100% for voluntary transparency. If you want to share your numbers and be a good partner, do that. Absolutely. I am not going to demand that brokers disclose their their gross profit margins to a carrier any more than I would coerce a carrier or a driver to share their gross margins with their broker. I think doing that gives unfair leverage either way you slice it. And again, well, there's so many ways you can go at this, but gross profit margins do not translate into net operating income. They do not. What I will say about the transparency issue when it comes to brokers and carriers is brokers by and large know their operating costs. So if a broker is moving a load at 18% and their net on that, depending on all kinds of variables, is probably between 1.5% and 4%. So at the end of the day, if they're able to be efficient, they're making 4% net margin, net operating income on a load. I would almost guarantee you, and again, this is not a shot to drivers, not a shot to carriers at all. I don't know that small to mid-sized carriers know their numbers that well. And they need to, because they may think that they need $285 or $485 or $5 a mile to operate. Otherwise, they're not going to be profitable. But at the same time, they don't know what they're spending in fuel costs. They don't know what they're spending in insurance. They don't know how that breaks down per load. They don't know what they need per mile. They don't know how many miles they need per week at whatever mileage rate they're going to get in order to maintain profitability. You have to know that as a business owner. And so I don't like the idea that carriers kind of use transparency as a club to beat brokers with when they don't even know their own profit margins.
I mean, honestly, what it's really boils down to times like, when you have any cycle at the lowest point of the cycle, there's always going to be the hey, we're screaming to figure out what's going on. It happens with gas prices. Gas prices, skyrocket to $6-7 a gallon, and the first thing people do is they go inside to the gas station attendants that's ringing out the M&Ms to say, hey, you know what, you guys are raking in all the money. I think that trust, and like you talked about trust, and it goes on both sides. There's a lack of trust on both sides. I think the most important thing about that is that that's not a smoking gun that most realize. That even if you're able to see a margin between someone, and you got to go back when you look at where transparency really came from. It came from the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, right? So we're talking about almost 45 years ago, to where that law was put, or that guideline was put in place. But freight was different back then. There wasn't 300,000 motor carriers. There weren't 60, 70,000, brokers out there. There was only a handful on both sides. So it was one of those things where it's saying, hey, Dan, if we're an affiliate partner, because truly it was an affiliate partner agreement between the broker and the carrier. And the only way that Dan, as being my affiliate partner, the only way that I know that, hey, I'm getting paid what we agreed to as my affiliate commission is that there's transparency in there. And that is where that whole thing came from. It didn't come from, hey, we have a new digital marketplace where there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of, sometimes in any day, hundreds of thousand transactions that's taking place. It didn't come from that. And I think it's really, really important that if there's and my thought is, if there's a guideline that needs to be changed, it needs to evaluate the overall business model that works in that particular environment at that particular day, and it needs to be future proof. But the problem is you can't do that when it comes to economics. And the worst thing that you want to do is you want to have government over regulated again, because now you're picking and choosing the overstepping of the regulation. So
Right.
It can go all day long.
And we're going into an environment, if we're going to be honest, and I'm not going to get political, but we're going into an environment where we are not going to see more regulation on the whole. I think we will see better regulation because the regulations that do come through are going to be more intentional. They're going to be hopefully better crafted. We will see. But I'm going to go to bat for carriers for a second here as well. So the transparency issue is one thing. There is a huge issue and I've seen this as long as I've been in brokerage, there's a huge issue where I think transparency is needed. And that is when it comes to detention, when it comes to
Yeah.
layover, when it comes to
Yeah.
these fines being levied
Yep.
by shippers, whether it's a macro point tracking fee if they don't track the truck, or whether it's a late fee. I know for a fact there are many brokerages out there that take advantage of that, and they use that to pad their profit margins. I think that in and of itself should be looked down on, and that's an unfair business practice. I don't think it's a transparency issue. I think it should be dealt with separately. But that's just bad business practice, and we do see that. And so I know that that's one of the big things that fuels this conversation for carriers. And I don't want to come across as not being aware of or empathetic to that, because that's a huge issue.
No, and you hit the nail on the head, because those are those over leveraged situations that really bridge that. It takes that bridge that you build in to bridge the gap, and it blows that bridge up
Mhm.
to the point of no repair. Because when you have these instances that are constantly happening out there, and the carrier obviously is the ones that are impacted the most by it. When you have those instances constantly occurring, those are the things that you gotta be cautious about. What are some warning signs that a carrier should walk away from when they're interacting with a broker?
Where do we start on this one?
Give me the number one, the top warning sign that when it comes from a carrier saying, "Hey, you know what? You need to watch for this guy." If you could just
Yeah.
be that type of person, what would that be?
I think off the bat, if the broker doesn't sound like they have all the information on the load, no matter how good the rate is, do not work with them.
Mhm.
Um, as a broker, you have a responsibility to communicate the entirety of your understanding of that load to the carrier,
Yeah.
on behalf of the shipper. And if the broker is trying to sell you a load, and he does not, or she does not have all the information that you need, I would tell them respectfully, go back, get that information from your customer, and then call me back. Because I've rarely seen a situation, and I went to bat for carriers all the time. I rarely saw a situation where a carrier took a load from a broker who did not have all the information, and something did not go sideways. Whether it was a double broker issue, whether it was a attempted identity theft or a scam, or whether the broker was just flat out lying about when
Mhm.
the appointment time was to get the driver on the road, uh, telling him that the delivery time was on Tuesday when he knew damn well it was on Thursday.
Mhm.
Yeah, if the broker does not have all the information, or the information doesn't add up, then I would run. Also, if the broker does have all the information and you object to the information, and he says, "Oh, don't worry, we'll work it out while you're over the road," no,
Mhm.
I wouldn't do
Mhm.
that either. Um, I tell carriers this all the time: don't take desperate freight. Don't be desperate for freight. There's plenty of freight out there. There's plenty of loads out there. Yeah, you may not get the rate per mile that you want or that you need, but take the loads that you know are a sure thing. Also, if you're factoring company, if you work with a factoring company, and that factoring company has their spidey sense goes off about that broker, listen to that. They have all kinds of analytics and metrics in the background that you don't even know exist, that they're running these brokers through different risk profiles. Trust your partners. We have, and trust is not just something that brokers and carriers need to develop. We need to develop trust across the board more fully in logistics and transportation.
And that really kind of sparked your enthusiasm and your transition from, hey, you know what? I've got my own brokerage thing. I'm doing really well. I scaled it very quickly in less than 3 years, but that's not where my heart lies. I really think that I can make a bigger impact by doing something bigger. And you started off with the Broker Carrier Summit. Tampa, Florida. Very first event. I think you had a handful of folks there. Really wasn't really was one of those things where you just wanted to kind of figure it out and see how things kind of played out. And then you fast forward to now, the Broker Carrier Summit is a movement. And it's one of those things where it started getting that steam as you develop that consistency. Talk a little bit about the thought behind it. You're a little different when it comes to events too. I don't know if you notice or not. You do 2 events a year, and there are no
Yeah.
places that you can stop and have a booth and sit up and talk to somebody vending, right? You came out with a completely different approach. Talk to me a little bit about what spurred that. Why are we doing 2 a year? Why are we saying, hey, we're going to set it this way versus that way, to really showcase what your vision was and where that success can end up coming up as far as the movement behind the Broker Carrier Summit.
Yeah, well, the main thing behind the no booths specifically speaks to one of the larger principles that we have at the Broker Carrier Summit, and that is the fact that people need to talk with people. We need to get both sides of the table in the room and have conversations. We highlight conversations and relationships over pitches. In fact, even when it comes to our speakers, we have a firm no pitch policy. You can speak about issues in the industry, but if you get up there and start hawking your product, we're not going to invite you back. It's not that we don't want people to sell. In fact, our sponsors have told us this is one of the best events that they go to, not because they necessarily sell more, but because they get an opportunity to actually learn from the boots on the ground as to what is going on in the industry. So we really want to highlight conversation and relationships over just presentations. So
So if you're a carrier, if I'm on an operator that's on this show today, and it costs a lot of money to operate a truck on a day to day basis. You have a summit, your summit several days. If I'm an owner operator, what do I expect from a ROI perspective on? Hey, is it worth it? Should I come out there as an owner operator? Should I kind of sit? Let's talk about that a little bit.
yeah, I would answer that initially with a question. As an owner operator, as a small carrier or mid-sized carrier, are you content and happy with the brokerage relationships you currently have? If you're like most carriers, the answer is going to be no. So the benefit that you would have as a carrier coming to the Broker Carrier Summit is you are going to be interacting with and meeting with partnership minded brokerages who do not want to treat you as a carrier as a commodity. We're taking the transactional mindset almost completely out of the equation, and we're replacing it with intentional and authentic relationships. And we've seen that over and over again. Again, the stories of carriers who come to the summit, and whether it's over luncheon lanes or at a networking event or during one of the sessions, they meet a broker and they get signed up with that broker on the spot. And before they leave the event, they have trucks over the road. That's the most common story at the Broker Carrier Summit. I was asked by Mike Riccio, who is formerly on the board of the TIA. He asked, why would people come back to the Broker Carrier Summit time and time again? Because half of our attendees are returning attendees. And I said, it's easy, Mike. They come here and they make money. Whether they're a broker or a carrier, the carriers come here and they find valuable customer relationships. The brokers come here and find reliable carriers, which wins them more freight. Everybody wins. So
what's the vision, 2027, 2028? What do you see for the BCS? What are your vision plans in terms of impact? What do you see as we go forward?
yeah, I think we're already seeing it. The BCS is going to change the way that brokers and carriers interact with each other, which will in turn change the way that the logistics industry works. We are not interested in only having a semi-annual event. We're interested in creating a movement and creating actionable change in the industry. That's why we rolled out the events when we did. That's why we're rolling out the BCS Freight Network now, which is going to be a curated network of prior attendees to the Broker Carrier Summit, as well as other companies who haven't been able to make it yet. Where they're able to interact with each other throughout the year. They're able to share opportunities, whether it's loads, lanes, job opportunities. We're working on creating a content bank for brokers and carriers to help them build their professional development. Because one of the things that we realized in Kansas City was that very little goes into developing drivers and carriers professionally. And it's a real shame because they are hungry
Yeah.
to learn how to operate their businesses efficiently and profitably, but nobody seems to take the time, by and large, to invest in them. We're going to do that. We want the best, most educated, most professional, and most profitable carriers and brokers to be a part of the BCS. And we want to be able to take the BCS brand and use it as a way to elevate your brand. So I have one of the things we're doing right now with the membership is By the end of the year, we're going to have a logo where if you are a member of the BCS Freight Network, you can put the member logo on your email signatures, and we're going to start actively marketing indirectly to shippers the value of the Broker Carrier Summit. That way, when shippers see the BCS Freight Network member logo on a carrier's or broker signature, they will know. They won't know exactly probably what that means, but they will know that, oh, they're affiliated with this organization that's doing some pretty incredible things in the freight world. So we want to use it as an elevator for all of our members.
No, I love that. And I love the community approach that, you're taking from that perspective and then saying, hey, you know what? As a carrier, we want to make sure that it's not just, hey, you coming to the table and having conversations. We want to make sure you prep. We want to make sure that you're ready. We want to make sure you got everything that you need. So that way, when we having these conversations, you're going to be on your A game, broker's going to be on their A game, and then we can all work in this 3PL environment together. Well, listen, how would folks, if they're interested in the movement, if they're interested in getting started, if they're interested in those things that you just described, how would the listeners be able to go in and tap in?
Yeah, so you can reach out to us on our website, www.brokercarriersummit.com. If you want to learn more about the BCS Freight Network, it's www.bcsfreightnetwork.com. My email address is dan@brokercarriersummit.com. I'm easily accessible. If you have any questions at all, you can reach out to me directly. You can reach out through the website. But we would love to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Man, I love it. I love it. Well, Dan, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you taking your busy time out of your schedule. I know even though you've left the high frequency side of being able in freight transaction, it's no slower in this particular environment as you put this event together that's going to take place here in less than 50 days now?
48 days away, my friend.
Yeah, so you're getting close to the time for the next event, and I'm hoping that everybody that's on this particular session takes the opportunity and connects, gets involved with the movement, or even come out and really show their faces out there and really walk away with valuable, actionable items. Folks, as we always do when we get on these podcast episodes, our focus is to be neutral but provide you with accountability and action items so that way you can take it away and run your business better. My goal is for you to be in this business for the long haul. And in order to do that, you have to encapsulate a lot of different varieties and you have to be accountable. So I hope today's episode did that for you. If you have had any value in today's episode, make sure that you like, share, subscribe, and also make sure that you're subscribed to the playbook. My name is Adam, and I'm looking forward to see you on the long haul. See you in your next episode.